My dad was very active when he was young, and since his father was a teacher, he grew up living on the grounds of large schools. So he was always out charging around, climbing trees, playing sports. He loved ball sports, characterized by intermittent sprints and lots of cutting and rotation, such as rugby, cricket, and squash. And in recent years, he spent more time cycling and playing quite a lot of golf. He's now in his early 70s and finds standing and walking for long periods uncomfortable. Sitting with his spine flexed then helps relieve the pain. He also sometimes has unilateral leg weakness and some radiating pain in that leg with what I think is a dermatomal distribution pattern. And you spoke earlier about interval walking. He can actually tolerate a substantial volume of walking, but only if it's distributed into small chunks. Actually, last year, the two of us had a long weekend in Cologne, and he walked about 20,000 steps each day, more or less pain-free, but only because we never walked for more than about 20 minutes at a time. So perhaps you could give some other examples of spine hygiene for someone who's later in life and now has a senescent, arthritic, and stenotic spine.
Certainly. Uh, Again, you've given me a rough context, but for me to be fairly precise for him, I would need to see him and do an assessment, and then we would nail down with more precision his specific pain triggers and the nature of the stenosis. Is the stenosis and the symptoms from a general narrowing of the central spinal canal, or is it the lateral foramen of a certain joint? Is it bone spurs that are frictioning the nerves? Um, uh, there's lipomatosis, fat that grows around the spinal cord, etc. And then I want to watch him move and correlate the triggers with specific movements. And can we come up with movement regimens that will allow him to eventually walk? Then I want to see his daily habits. In other words, does he go and try and walk for an hour, gets the symptoms and has to sit down? But if he could walk for 10 minutes without getting symptoms, what we're going to do is calm the system down by having him go for a walk of 8 minutes. Don't go near the trigger, but do it 6 times a day. So 6 times 8 is 48 minutes. We're getting close to an hour now of cumulative walking where we're guaranteeing success. If there is a nerve friction component and we can do some nerve flossing, nerves have a curious ability to find their own pathway. So, say a nerve is coming through a foramen and it's being frictioned a little bit. The nerve, over time, if you allow it to floss, creates its own pathway and can reduce the friction. So, can we come up with a clever regimen of femoral and sciatic nerve root flossing to allow more movement? So you see it's layer upon layer, but I need stenosis is not a diagnosis. I have to be much more specific. Are the facet joints thick and arthritic and encroaching on the nerve from behind? Is the ligamentum flavum now thickened? Um, again, there's just layer upon layer of how we're going to do this. So sometimes a postural change, if it's a foraminal stenosis, can open up the foramen almost immediately. Simply walking, changing the posture of the neck, changes the tension in the spinal cord and therefore the friction lower down. Doing some if he's starting to round with a little bit of kyphosis, if we can add a little bit of thoracic extension, you've now decreased the resting tension on the spinal cord and taken off some of the pressure if it's again a foraminal trigger to this broader diagnosis of stenosis. So there's just a beginning. Um, uh, Spine hygiene, if I can just demonstrate this, might be something like what we call a park bench decompression. So your dad might be going for a walk in the woods or walk in the park, and there's the back of a park bench. He feels just the first premonition of a little bit of the stenotic sign. externally rotate and put the heels of the hands on the back of the park bench, move the feet back, and posture up over your hands. So this is called posting in athletics. He posts up over that and then lets his hips fall to the back of the park bench just a little bit. Now, this might be a log, it might be the back of a pickup truck, it could be anything. Post and go into that traction, chest proud with a little bit of extension for 40 seconds and have him stand up. And he's going to say, I feel a little bit better. Or he's going to say, oh, no, that really triggered me. And I don't know which way it's going to go until we do the assessment and figure it out. But we will figure it out. And if there's something that can be done, we will put that together in a full program of exposure to appropriate stress with appropriate rest and see what adaptations we can create. Now, maybe his shoulders are worn out and he can't post, so we'll have to come up with an alternative. Maybe he's really in a bad way, and the only real option left now is to give the nerves more room and to go and see the right spinal surgeon who can create the space by burring out the offending bone if it's only on one location, or to do more extensive opening of the nerve spaces. So, you can't cure everything, and there's certainly a time and a place for a good surgeon. But anyway, there's a very broad spectrum of possibilities for the scenario that you just created.